Could Turkey really be preparing to intervene in neighboring Syria? The president chairing a National Security Council meeting Monday after fiery remarks he made last Friday. Here's the surprising bit. The same Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who was accused of sitting idle when Islamic State militants seized the border town of Kobane last year, but after a string of successes by Syrian Kurds against ISIS, is now suddenly springing into action, this over the prospect of a Kurdish state on its border. I say to the international community that whatever price must be paid, we will never allow the establishment of a new state on our southern frontier in the north of Syria. Those are remarks he made last Friday. We'll weigh up the prospect of a buffer zone in northern Syria, and here's some appeasing remarks out of Turkey. Can Turkey enforce such a buffer zone, by the way? And would it mean crossing swords with NATO partner, the United States? After all, Washington strongly backing Syrian Kurdish PYD fighters with airstrikes, the PYD, which denies it wants to set up an independent state. So why now this talk about a buffer zone? Sources tell Turkish media it's about securing the border. Turkey's opposition claims it's posturing as Erdogan tries to form a coalition government, possibly with hardline anti-Kurdish nationalists. The head of the Social Democratic CHP party's tweeting, even before a government has been established, the drums of war are being beaten for vested interests. More broadly, 1 year after the emergence of ISIS in Syria and Iraq, more than 4 years after the start of the uprising against Bashar al-Assad, are the fault lines shifting faster than we think in the region? Today in the France 24 debate, Erdogan's border bother. And with us from Istanbul, Mustafa Aydin, who teaches international relations at Kadir House University. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
From Brussels, Adam Uzun, member of the Kurdish National Congress. Welcome to the show, sir. We say hello to William Jordan, former U.S. State Department official, once upon a time posted in Syria. Thank you for joining us. And joining us from Geneva, Aaron Stein, the author of Turkey's New Foreign Policy. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. The latest news out of Ankara, top presidential aide, quick to react to this morning's headlines in the Turkish press. He rejects talk of war, saying the government is talking with NATO allies over border security. This in the wake of Monday's, again, it's this National Security Council meeting that took place in the capital on Monday.
We will continue to welcome our brothers to end this tragedy of humanity, but we have a strong political will. If Turkey's border security is damaged, or if we come to the conclusion that this garden of serenity is under threat, Turkey is ready for any contingency. And we have carried out all the necessary work in order to be ready.
Mustafa Aydin, what's your reading of what happened at that National Security Council meeting and of what the true intentions are of the Turkish government?
Well, the signals are mixed, of course. It seems that the government side pressurized the military to get a clear view on how and when and whether we could establish some sort of an operation towards that area of Syria. But in return, it seems that the military is not very happy, or military side is not very happy to be pushed around as such. And they have been pointing out that the current government is a sort of a caretaker government until a real government is established because of the election in previous month. And they are saying that the situation is not so dire. It doesn't require immediate action. And so they are resisting. And if there is going to be operation, somehow they want a very clear, either very clear decision from the parliament, a new decision from the parliament, or a very clear order, direct written order from the government itself.
Were you surprised to hear this talk of a buffer zone?
No, because this is on and off, has been talked in Turkey since last 2-3 years, since the Syrian civil war has started. Previously, it was not possible at all because the border is like about 900 kilometers, Turkey and Syrian border. But this time, the talk is about a smaller part of the border. So it's more possible to manage. But this is something, a very kind of a issue comes up every so often in Turkey, not only regarding Syria, but sometimes about Iraq as well. Whenever there is this kind of a disturbance on the other side of the border. And let us not forget that Turkey has already have about 2 million Syrian refugees. And as long as the conflict continues, they keep coming. So there is a certain need to do something there.
All right, let's show our viewers and go to the map to see where this buffer zone might be. Daily newspaper Hurriyet reporting that the president and the prime minister want to, quote, kill two birds with one stone with a military intervention along the Mare line. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Adam Uzun, in that part of Syria right there. What do you think are the prospects of this really happening?
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, that is the result of the Turkish government since few years regarding their neighbors. The foreign affairs policy on Turkey was not based on the peace. They want to get rid Bashar Assad. So therefore, they first support some rebels, they support some oppositions. Then those oppositions become more radical. They give them up. After they invited some coalition, Syria coalition, to Turkey, they paid a lot for that. But because those coalition has no power on the ground, and those coalitions didn't fulfill their obligations. So now the Turkey is trying to intervene in Syria.
So you are taking this seriously. You are saying that there is this is a serious plan to intervene.
Yes, they are trying to do that, but we have to see why they are trying to do that or why they are treating to do that. Because it will not be any intervention or any buffer zone against ISIS. No, they are trying to have a safe haven against the Kurdish status in Syria, in northern Syria, because after the Kurds have unified the Cizre canton and Kobane canton, take Tel Abyad from ISIS, liberated Tel Abyad from ISIS. Now Turkey is afraid Kurds are going to unify Afrin and Kobane. So therefore they are going to make a buffer zone between Afrin and Kobane, so to prevent any unification on the Kurdish areas. So I think that is an policy, anti-Kurdish policy by the Turkish state. It is not a realistic policy, and any intervention by Turkey to Syria will have some effects on the international policy, will have effects in Turkey itself, and will have effects in Syria. So I think the basis for any intervention from Turkey to Syria is not ready. The international coalition will not be happy with it. The Kurdish community in Syria, the Kurdish community in Turkey will not be happy with it. Russia will not be happy with it. And I don't think so that Iran will be happy with it too. So maybe they are trying to intervene, they are planning to intervene, they are making that propaganda. But in the reality, I don't so they will be in the position to take that risk.
They won't be in the position to take a risk. So, Arenstein, there you heard...
they should not be in that position.
Let me turn to Arenstein in Geneva. Aaron, you heard Adam saying that Erdogan wishes he could intervene along that buffer zone, but it could prove tricky on the ground. How much of it is brinkmanship and has to do with domestic politics?
Well, I think it reflects a serious concern on the Turkish side about exactly what Aydin was talking about, which is the advancement of the Kurdish forces inside Syria and the possibility that they can begin to impinge upon certain places in Syria that Turkey deems to be of its vital interest. The problem I see with it is that Ankara would have to be willing to commit military force to areas that ISIS controls. And so by taking action in Syria, the military would have to be signaling that it would be ready to do battle with ISIS, not just in Jarablus, which is ISIS held, but if the leaks are to be believed, 33 kilometers into Syria, which would also bring into the town of Manbij, which is also controlled by ISIS. And they're apparently very dug in these areas. And so you will have Turkish casualties coming home at a time when the AKP government, which Erdogan is not officially a member of, but nevertheless personally affiliated with, is trying to negotiate a coalition agreement to govern the country. So it's politically problematic. So the resolution of military force would have to come with the guarantee that Turkey is willing to accept casualties inside Syria.
And your comment on the latest from the battlefield, Aaron, because we're getting word, according to monitors inside of Syria, that there's been a counterattack by ISIS against one of these border towns that was taken over recently by the Kurds. Who's got the upper hand?
Well, and certainly the Kurdish forces, it's in Tel Abyad, right on the border. I mean, certainly the Kurdish forces are well entrenched in the city, although they're new. And to be honest, I just came on camera, but the latest reports indicate that it's a smaller group of ISIS members, possibly what is referred to as sleeper cells, similar to the two vehicle-borne IEDs that were exploded in Kobane a couple of days ago. So certainly, ISIS remains a potent threat behind the lines. There are Kurdish members of ISIS, and they've shown the ability to pass Syrian Kurdish checkpoints and infiltrate parts of the city and carry out sort of harassment attacks that are nevertheless deadly for the Kurdish forces controlling it.
William Jordan, this week marks the first anniversary of ISIS taking over vast swathes of territory in Syria and Iraq. The Kurds have been doing most of the fighting in the north. In fact, all of the fighting, excuse me, in the north of those two countries. There's been the whole time this talk of getting more boots on the ground. Listening to what we've just described about the situation there, who's going to do it?
Well, no, getting back to what everybody's more or less been saying up until now, it's hard to divorce whatever these discussions that are going on in Turkey about a possible action in Syria from the political reality in Turkey, of trying to form a coalition government. I don't know how much of this is just plain posturing for...
And do you get the sense that Erdogan is more concerned with the Kurds than with ISIS?
Yes. I mean, that's the impression that he gives. That's the impression that he's been giving for a while. I mean, it's not been the only reason, I think, for Turkey's reticence or reluctance to go much further as far as either being prepared to put its own troops on the ground in Syria, but I think also in terms of having any kind of a meaningful discussion with the U.S. or other members of the coalition. In fact, to my knowledge, Turkey has always been very careful to be sort of in and out of the coalition, formally associated with the coalition at the same time. I've talked on this platform in the past about how the Turkish position making it very hard for the U.S. military to use a major airbase in Incirlik has hampered U.S. military operations. And all of this has been a very real problem for the U.S. I think that, from Washington's perspective, there's probably some frantic effort to try to get to the bottom of what it is the Turks want to do, try to establish the bottom line, in fact, to be willing to support Turkey as much as possible, but at the same time trying to untie this Gordian knot, as far as the Turks are concerned, between the focus on Islamic State, secondarily the regime of Bashar al-Assad, which are the two things that I think the U.S. would want Turkey to be more focused on, and then the Kurdish issue, which from the U.S. point of view is reduced in many ways to whoever is the most effective agent on the ground to be able to attack the Islamic State and try to make some headway in the larger struggle there.
All right, lots of reactions coming in. This one on Twitter: Turkey may have to intervene in Syria. The war is causing a humanitarian crisis for the Turks. Mustafa Aydin, how many people in Turkey agree with that view?
I don't think much of it, because we conduct surveys. Just about 2 months ago, I did a survey throughout Turkey about Turkish foreign policy, and one of the questions was whether Turkey should be active and interfering against ISIS. And the majority of the population, around 70%, said Turkey should not do anything at all against ISIS. And they were very clearly opposing military operation. So I don't think that the majority of the population supports that kind of a view. Although some part of the society is clearly concerned about the threat that ISIS poses. About 90% of the population says that they are a terrorist organization, and similar percentage says that they are a threat to Turkey as well. But nevertheless, they are very clear not to act militarily against it.
And Mustafa, on that point, you heard William Jordan spell out the three concerns, of course, for Turkey: ISIS, the Kurds, and of course the regime of Bashar al-Assad. What's the order of priority for President Erdogan at this point?
Yeah, at this point, I think the first priority is the local domestic electioneering. It's a kind of posturing because there is a negotiations going on in the country at the moment for coalition government, and there is a huge possibility of going a re-election soon. And there is rumor that the president actually prefers for re-election. So I think his first concern is kind of trying to muddle the negotiations at the moment inside the country and create a position for possible re-election. And of course, the second, then if you go the others, the order would be Kurds, Bashar Assad, and ISIS. I think the government is not particularly concerned at this moment about the ISIS threat.
Oh, ISIS, bottom of the list. Mustafa Aydin, I know you have to leave us early, so thank you for being with us. But I want to ask the rest of our panelists to bear with us. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. It's the France 24 debate.